May 20, 1942, in the subterranean station beneath Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Lieutenant Commander Thomas Dyer held a trembling message in his weary hands as he deciphered the Japanese text. He understood that this information could alter the course of the Pacific War. The enemy fleet at location, AF, comprised 2 aircraft carriers, 7 cruisers, and numerous destroyers. With bloodshot eyes from 3 sleepless nights, he scrutinized the intercept produced by their IBM tabulating machines, revealing Admiral Yamamoto's comprehensive battle strategy for what the Japanese anticipated would be a decisive triumph. In the windowless basement below Pearl Harbor's administrative building, a team of cryptanalysts had just accomplished an achievement deemed mathematically impossible by the Imperial Japanese Navy. They had cracked JN-25, Japan's most advanced naval code, without the enemy realizing it. Commander Joseph John Rochefort shuffled across the cold floor in his slippers and smoking jacket, which he had worn day after day until his staff no longer noticed. A sign on his desk read, "You don't have to be crazy to work here, but it helps." Beneath this disheveled exterior lay the sharpest cryptanalytic mind in the U.S. Navy. Unbeknownst to the Japanese admirals orchestrating their expansive operation, this moment would mark a catastrophic intelligence failure in naval history, stemming from an obliviousness to code compromise that would lead to the Imperial Navy's demise. The team Rochefort led in the frigid basement, nicknamed the dungeon due to its poor ventilation and perpetual chill, processed 140 Japanese messages daily. By May's end, they would handle even more as Admiral Chester Nimitz prepared his Midway orders. The Japanese, supremely confident in their cryptographic superiority, continued transmitting their most confidential operational plans through a system they believed impervious to decryption, unaware that American cryptanalysts were intercepting these communications. The calculations leading to Japanese defeat were being performed not on battlefields, but on IBM punch cards in a Pearl Harbor basement, systematically dismantling Japanese strategic planning. By breaking the code, the Imperial Navy would continue trusting until the war's end. The Imperial Japanese Navy introduced JN-25 on June 1, 1939, replacing an earlier system used since 1931. For Japanese cryptographers in the Navy's 4th Department Communications, this new code represented cryptographic security at its peak, a 2-layer system of such complexity that breaking it was thought to be beyond current computational capabilities. The initial version contained approximately 30,000 code groups, expanding to nearly 45,000 by 1942, each a 5-digit number divisible by 3, intended as a garble check for transmission errors. This mathematical quirk, designed to ensure accuracy, inadvertently provided American cryptanalysts their first point of entry into the system. Words, phrases, and even individual syllables were first encoded using an extensive codebook, then obscured through false additions with random numbers from separate cipher tables containing 50,000 possible additives. Captain Ito Tsunizo, head of the Japanese Navy's Communications Security Section, had personally overseen JN-25's development. During post-war interrogations, he confessed that we were convinced of the system's absolute security. With tens of thousands of code groups and 50,000 additives, the number of possible combinations was astronomical, far beyond what humans could calculate manually. However, the Japanese made a critical error. They never anticipated that American analysts would repurpose commercial IBM tabulating machines, originally designed for census data and accounting tasks, to perform sophisticated cryptanalytic functions. These devices were capable of processing millions of combinations swiftly, identifying hidden patterns unnoticeable by human analysts, and completing complex calculations in hours that would have taken teams of mathematicians years to achieve manually. when JN-25 billion replaced JN-25A on December 1, 1940. A little over a year before the attack on Pearl Harbor, American cryptanalysts faced the daunting realization that months of painstaking work had become obsolete. They were forced to start anew, reconstructing their comprehension of the new system as tensions escalated in the Pacific. By the morning of December 7, 1941, they had managed to decipher only around 10 to 15% of intercepted messages, which was just enough to detect an uptick in Japanese naval activity, but insufficient for predicting the exact location of the impending strike. Station Hypo's workspace was described by one visitor as the most dispiriting military environment in the Pacific, situated in a basement with no windows, natural light, or fresh air. The constant noise from IBM machines and thick cigarette smoke from chain-smoking analysts created an oppressive atmosphere that newcomers found almost unbearable. Yet under Rochefort's leadership, this team emerged as Admiral Nimitz would later describe it, the most valuable intelligence unit in naval warfare history. Despite its small size, ranging between 30 to 50 personnel at its peak during the Midway crisis, it boasted some of the Navy's brightest minds. Lieutenant Commander Wesley Ham Wright, who resembled actor Wallace Beery but possessed extraordinary mathematical skills, often worked non-stop for 48 hours, fueled solely by coffee and sheer determination. Lieutenant Joseph Finnegan earned the nickname Our Babe Ruth due to his knack for cracking cryptanalytic puzzles. He narrowly survived the Pearl Harbor attack when the USS Tennessee was bombed. Afterward, he channeled his desire for vengeance into code breaking with such intensity that even Rochefort felt concerned. It was Finnegan who achieved a critical breakthrough in deciphering the Japanese date-time cipher by working backward from intercepted weather reports to crack the superinscription protecting operational dates. Marine Major Alva Red Laswell served as chief translator, combining an intuitive grasp of Japanese language patterns with remarkable mathematical insight despite never completing high school. Observers described him poring over text through green eye shades pulled low against fluorescent lights, a cigar clamped between his teeth. Commander Thomas Dyer, responsible for numerous crucial breakthroughs, kept a sign that epitomized the dungeon-like atmosphere of Station Hypo. Following exceptionally demanding periods, observers noted his unkempt appearance, with stubble covering his face and bloodshot eyes due to insufficient sleep. His walk revealed the extent of his fatigue. By May 1942, this small group had managed to decipher roughly 40% of intercepted JN-25 billion communications, though not word-for-word translations. Instead, they could ascertain the general meaning and operational significance of Japanese transmissions through a technique known as gissening. The adaptation of IBM equipment for decoding purposes marked a technological leap that Japanese cryptographers did not foresee. Station Hypo utilized IBM 600 and won multiplying punches alongside sorters, collators, tabulators, and key punches, machines capable of processing thousands of punch cards per hour, each holding 80 columns of data representing intercepted code groups. A pivotal moment occurred when cryptanalyst Thomas Dyer observed that despite instructions to begin coding at random points within their cipher tables, Japanese radio operators frequently started from convenient positions such as page 1, line 1, or other easily recalled spots. This predictable behavior created patterns that IBM machines could detect and utilize. In April 1942, a single run on the IBM equipment revealed an intriguing pattern. Specific groups repeatedly appeared at the start of messages. Ham Wright hypothesized these initial sequences might represent numerals, given that Japanese communications often began with references like "Your message number 473." Comparing this hypothesis against old diplomatic code books acquired years earlier confirmed his suspicion. The Japanese were still using a numerical coding system they had previously deemed outdated. Custom modifications to IBM equipment were nothing short of remarkable. By spring 1941, the Navy had commissioned machines with over 75 specialized attachments tailored for cryptanalytic tasks. These devices could perform depth analysis, identifying messages encoded with identical additive sequences in minutes rather than days. For instance, a skilled analyst would take approximately 10 hours to compare two 200-letter messages manually for patterns, whereas IBM equipment could accomplish the same task in under 3 minutes. The financial commitment was substantial for that time period. The Navy spent hundreds of thousands of dollars annually on IBM equipment rental and custom modifications. The machines required so much power that Station Hypo had to have its own dedicated electrical supply. Without these machines, decrypting JN-25 would have been inconceivable. The Imperial Japanese Navy held an almost religious belief in the security of JN-25. Commander Yamamoto Yuji, a top cryptographic official, provided evidence to support this after World War II. We were convinced that Americans lacked the necessary linguistic proficiency for cryptanalysis. In conjunction with our strong mathematical safeguards, we felt confident not only that JN-25 was unbreakable, but also that no one would even try. This overconfidence pervaded Japanese military thought. A 1941 intelligence report by the Naval General Staff asserted that fewer than 100 Americans had adequate Japanese language skills for military translation, and none possessed both linguistic and mathematical expertise needed for cryptanalysis. This assessment was profoundly incorrect. Since the early 1920s, the U.S. Navy had been rigorously training officers in Japanese, sending them to reside in Japan to attain near-native fluency. Additionally, the Japanese made a grave mistake by focusing solely on mathematical complexity as the foundation of their code security. They overlooked human factors that contribute to cryptographic vulnerabilities. Under pressure, radio operators often took shortcuts, and tired clerks might start encoding messages at convenient points. Weather stations sent reports in predictable formats and at consistent times, while supply officers used stereotypical language when placing requisitions. These patterns provided cryptanalysts with what are known as cribs, known or guessed plaintext that could unravel entire encrypted messages. Even more detrimental was the rigid institutional culture of the Japanese Navy, which fostered unyielding loyalty but stifled critical examination of security procedures. When American carriers appeared at precisely the right defensive positions and submarines were positioned along secret routes, naval leadership attributed these occurrences to superior American reconnaissance rather than a breach in communications security. Post-war testimony revealed the extent of this misconception. Shigeru Yamamoto's chief of staff once remarked post-war that when American officials informed them they had been decoding Japan's communications, many Japanese officers refused to accept it and believed there must have been traitors involved. April 28, 1942, was a pivotal moment for Japanese cryptographic security. On this day, Station Hypo intercepted a message that stunned the intelligence team in the basement. The message revealed that Japanese naval forces were ordered to complete their preparations and await further instructions. The target was referred to as AF. Rochefort had encountered this designation previously, and his group had been monitoring references to AF for several weeks. Each time it appeared, it coincided with operations near Midway Atoll. However, correlation alone did not amount to proof, and Washington's codebreakers at Op-20G suggested that AF could refer to the Aleutian Islands or even Hawaii. As May approached, Admiral Nimitz was left grappling with conflicting intelligence assessments. Rochefort sought concrete evidence. Jasper Holmes, a retired submarine officer recalled for his expertise in intelligence due to arthritis, offered a solution. Holmes recognized Midway's crucial dependency on its desalination plant for water supply. On May 19, Rochefort presented this plan to Edwin Layton, Nimitz's chief of naval intelligence. They would instruct the Midway garrison to send an urgent message via the secure underwater cable connecting Pearl Harbor and Midway that was beyond Japan's ability to intercept. The message would claim a critical failure in their water distillation facility. The ruse was put into action on May 20, with Midway broadcasting the false distress signal on frequencies regularly monitored by Japanese forces. Within just one day, Japanese intelligence intercepted an American communication near Kwajalein and promptly relayed it to the combined fleet headquarters at JN-25. The message indicated that AF was experiencing a shortage of freshwater due to the malfunctioning distillation plant. Upon decoding this intercepted message on May 22, there was an immediate sense of excitement in the basement as the implications became clear. Midway had indeed been identified as the target by the Japanese, and their confidence in understanding ongoing operations was now confirmed beyond any doubt. The Japanese had fully bought into the deception without raising suspicion about why such critical information would be broadcasted openly. Knowing where the enemy intended to strike was vital, but Nimitz also needed precise timing details. The complex nature of Japanese communications included an extra layer of encryption known as date-time groups, which were separately encrypted before encoding in JN-25. This additional security measure had long eluded American cryptographers. However, a breakthrough emerged through meticulous analysis of weather reports. Joseph Finnegan observed that Japanese weather stations transmitted data at exact intervals every day and included the specific time and date of their observations. By cross-referencing hundreds of these transmissions with known times, he and his colleague Wright were able to compile a decryption table for converting encrypted dates back into readable formats. On May 24, this painstaking work paid off when they deciphered a message from Yamamoto specifying June 4 as the end date, with attacks scheduled to commence at 0:200 Tokyo time. Another intercepted communication revealed that the Japanese invasion force would arrive on June 7, 3 days after the carrier strike. Edwin Layton reviewed these decrypted messages and made his famous prediction to Admiral Nimitz. Admiral, the Japanese will launch their assault on Midway on June 4, approaching from a northwesterly direction at bearing 325 degrees. They plan to dispatch aircraft at 0:400 local time from a position 175 miles offshore. After carefully studying his intelligence officer's assessment, Nimitz asked with keen interest, "Are you confident in these details, Layton?" "Admiral, I can assure you that my estimates will be off by no more than 5 minutes, 5 degrees, and 5 miles. On June 4, 1942, at 5:34 local time, a PBY Catalina flying boat detected the Japanese carrier fleet heading towards Midway from a distance of 180 miles on a bearing of 320 degrees. The intelligence gathered was nearly flawless. A significant breakthrough in code breaking occurred on May 20 with the capture of Operational Order 14. This extensive 12-part message outlined Yamamoto's comprehensive battle strategy, including force composition, timing, and coordination between the Midway assault and a deceptive feint. Decoding these messages yielded an incredible level of detail. Admiral Nagumo's first carrier strike group would advance on Midway from the northwest with 4 carriers, along with support ships such as cargo vessels, Soyu-class transports, and Huru-type destroyers carrying 248 aircraft. The invasion force consisted of 5,000 troops aboard 12 transport ships. Supporting forces included 7 battleships, including Yamato, which at the time was the largest battleship ever constructed. Early May intercepts confirmed that 2 of Japan's most recent carriers, Shikaku and Zuikaku, damaged in the Battle of Coral Sea, would not participate, thereby reducing Japanese carrier strength from 6 to 4. This significantly improved the odds for American forces. Additional intercepted communications provided further operational specifics. On May 13, a message detailed submarine deployments. Submarine Squadron 3 was instructed to establish a patrol line 150 miles northwest of Hawaii by N-2 day. With this knowledge, Nimitz ordered his carriers to depart Pearl Harbor on May 28 and 30 before the Japanese submarines could arrive on June 2. Supply-related intercepts revealed the massive scale of the operation. One message specified fuel requirements. A tanker group would provide 28,000 tons of heavy oil and 1,200 tons of aviation fuel at position 30 degrees north, 170 degrees east on N+3 day. These details not only confirmed timing, but also exposed critical vulnerabilities. Japanese forces were pushing their logistical limits to the utmost capacity. Not everyone was convinced by the Hypo analysis. In Washington, Commander John Redmond oversaw Op 20G, which was the Navy's primary cryptanalytic center, and he strongly disagreed with Rochefort's methods and conclusions. While Rochefort relied on linguistic comprehension and intuition, Redmond focused on rigorous mathematical analysis. The Redmond brothers, John in cryptanalysis and his brother, Rear Admiral Joseph as Director of Naval Communications, had influential supporters. They persuaded Admiral Ernest King, Chief of Naval Operations, that Rochefort was acting independently and disregarding proper protocols by sharing unreliable intelligence with Nimitz. On May 14, Op 20G issued a formal intelligence assessment indicating that the Japanese target was likely the Aleutian Islands or possibly the west coast of the United States. They criticized Hypo for projecting desired outcomes onto ambiguous intercepts. This bureaucratic dispute nearly disrupted American preparations. Admiral King, who disapproved of Rochefort's non-military appearance and direct communication with Nimitz, favored Washington's stance. It took Nimitz's personal intervention, supported by the AF water shortage proof, to keep focus on Midway. Even after Hypo was proven correct at Midway, the Redmond brothers sought retribution. They convinced King that Hypo had merely been fortunate rather than competent, and that effective cryptanalysis required centralized control from Washington. By October 1942, Rochefort would be relieved of his command and reassigned to manage a floating dry dock, an ignominious end for the individual who contributed significantly to the Midway victory. Cracking JN-25 demanded unprecedented international collaboration. The British Far East Combined Bureau, FECB, established in Hong Kong in 1935, achieved the initial breakthrough against JN-25 as early as 1939. John Tiltman at Bletchley Park identified the system's fundamental structure and the characteristic divisibility by 3 that marked all valid code groups. When Japan introduced JN-25 billion on December 1, 1940, the British quickly made a crucial discovery that saved months of effort. Despite changing the codebook, the Japanese had left their additive tables intact. This allowed messages encoded in late November and early December to be compared, stripping away the encryption layer. By March 1941, the FECB had gathered nearly 3,000 code groups and shared them with American counterparts. The Dutch team operating from Comma 14 in Bandung Technical College on Java, under Lieutenant Commander Leo Brewer's leadership, contributed significantly to this effort. Since 1936, the Dutch had been intercepting Japanese naval communications, offering unique insights into their radio protocols. Following the fall of Java in March 1942, Brewer and his team fled to Australia with boxes of punch cards containing partially decrypted messages. Just before evacuating via submarine, they uncovered a critical piece of information. AF was the code for Midway. This revelation was relayed to Station Hypo just prior to their departure. The evacuation from Java involved 74 personnel who were deemed so crucial that several submarines made multiple trips between February and April 1942 to ensure everyone's safe passage. Once in Melbourne, they reformed as FRUMAL. Despite the vast distances and rudimentary communication methods, coordination among these units was exceptional. Decoded messages were transmitted via secure cables, recovered code groups distributed through diplomatic channels, and intercept coverage synchronized to prevent any gaps. By May 1942, Allied forces were able to intercept around 60% of Japanese naval radio traffic, but could only decode roughly 40% of it. The Imperial Japanese Navy's failure to detect the compromise of JN-25 stemmed from structural issues rather than mere overconfidence. Bureaucratic divisions between the 3rd Department, Intelligence, and 4th Department, Communications, hindered a comprehensive security assessment. Captain Itaru Takebana, head of the 3rd Department's American section, admitted post-war that there was no system in place to link operational failures with potential communications breaches. When American forces appeared at strategic locations, the Operations Department attributed it to poor reconnaissance rather than considering message interception as a possibility. The Japanese Navy's security procedures inadvertently aided American efforts to break codes by requiring full titles and unit designations in messages, which provided contextual clues. Acknowledgement messages often repeated key parts of original communications, while daily weather reports transmitted at fixed times offered predictable patterns for decryption. Physical security lapses also went unnoticed. The sinking of a submarine on January 20, 1942, in shallow waters near Darwin, contained critical code books that could have been salvaged by Australian divers. Despite this risk, the Japanese did not implement emergency code modifications, believing that the depth of the water would prevent recovery. However, they were mistaken. Australian divers quickly retrieved substantial cryptographic material and shared it with American codebreakers. On June 7, 1942, just 3 days after the Battle of Midway, the Chicago Tribune published an article that could have jeopardized America's intelligence advantage. The piece, titled "Navy Had Word of Jap Plan to Strike at Sea," exposed details only obtainable through code-breaking efforts. Stanley Johnston, a reporter who had been on board the USS Lexington during its sinking in the Coral Sea, gained access to classified message traffic while recovering aboard the cruiser Chester. His article included specific information about Japanese forces, ship names, and operational plans, clearly indicating a breach of codes. President Roosevelt was outraged and considered prosecuting Johnston under the Espionage Act. Navy Secretary Frank Knox advocated for the prosecution of Tribune publisher Colonel Robert McCormick, despite his civilian status. The Navy prepared charges that could have resulted in the death penalty for the publication's author. Surprisingly, Japanese intelligence did not detect this article. No agent or diplomat reported it, and German intelligence officers made no mention to their counterparts. The revelation that should have prompted immediate adjustments to JN-25 went completely unnoticed by the Japanese. The ensuing grand jury proceedings nearly caused more harm than the original publication itself, as prosecutors would need to disclose exactly what Johnston revealed and why it was significant. This testimony could have confirmed American success in code-breaking operations. Acknowledging the peril, the Navy dismissed all charges against the Tribune, ensuring that no punishment was imposed and keeping the secret intact. For the analysts at Station Hypo, the triumph at Midway did not bring jubilation, but instead increased pressure. They were well aware that the Japanese would eventually modify their codes, potentially depriving American intelligence of crucial information at a pivotal moment. Each day JN-25 remained decipherable was considered a precious gift that could abruptly cease without warning. The psychological toll on these individuals was immense. These men possessed knowledge about imminent convoy movements, submarine patrols, and impending invasions across various islands, information critical for saving countless American lives. But using it would expose the vulnerability of their code-breaking operations. Rochefort put in place stringent protocols to conceal the origins of intelligence. All information derived from decrypted messages had to be given an alternative plausible explanation. If a convoy route was discovered through cryptanalysis, commanders were informed that it came from submarine observations. Similarly, when invasion plans were revealed by decoding, they claimed these insights originated from captured documents. The stress visibly affected the analysts. Thomas Dyer developed chronic insomnia, his mind unable to rest even when he closed his eyes, still seeing code groups. Wesley Wright was plagued by severe anxiety, fearing that each day could bring the long-anticipated change in codes that would render American intelligence blind. Joseph Finnegan turned to heavy drinking as a way to escape from the distress of translating Japanese messages describing American prisoners, without being able to act upon them due to the risk of exposing their source. No incident better exemplified both the power and peril of code breaking than Admiral Yamamoto's assassination on April 18, 1943. In early April, his successor's organization intercepted a message in JN-25D containing Yamamoto's detailed travel schedule for an inspection tour of Solomon Islands bases. The message revealed that he would arrive at Balali Island at 9:45 on April 18, traveling by Betty bomber escorted by 60 fighters. The level of detail was astounding. Japanese staff officers had included every minute aspect in what they believed to be secure communication. Admiral Nimitz faced a deeply troubling decision. Yamamoto was Japan's most distinguished naval strategist and the mastermind behind the attack on Pearl Harbor. His demise would have a profound impact on Japanese morale, but intercepting his flight at the specified time and place would clearly reveal a breach in their codes. The final decision rested with President Roosevelt, who reportedly instructed simply, "Get him." American planners devised an intricate ruse involving P-38 Lightning fighters flying a 435-mile interception route at wave-top height. Additional patrols were deployed to create the appearance of routine operations, while coast watchers would report spotting Yamamoto's aircraft. On April 18th, as predicted, Yamamoto's plane appeared over Bougainville. American P-38s downed both Betty bombers, killing Yamamoto and his staff. The Japanese Navy suffered a severe blow, yet astonishingly, they made only routine changes to their codes. An inquiry later determined that local commanders had been negligent with security measures, failing to consider the possibility of a code breach leading to the ambush. By late 1942, decoding JN-25 had become an industrial-scale operation. The expanded Fleet Radio Unit Pacific, FRUPAC, occupied an entire floor in a new building at Pearl Harbor. IBM machines operated non-stop in air-conditioned rooms, and 3 shifts of cryptanalysts, translators, and analysts processed thousands of intercepted messages daily. This system was highly organized, rapidly entering intercepted code groups on punch cards, mostly done by young women recruited from Hawaii's commercial sector. enabled the sorting machines to identify potential cribs based on frequency analysis. Cryptanalysts then exploited these weaknesses to recover new code groups and additives. Translators transformed fragmented communications into English, and intelligence analysts compiled data from hundreds of partial decrypts into comprehensive reports. Ensuring accuracy became paramount. Each decoded code group was cross-checked against numerous messages to confirm its validity. Translation disagreements were settled by a committee, with native Japanese speakers having the ultimate authority. Intelligence documents included confidence ratings, distinguishing between verified facts and speculative inferences. The scope of the operation was immense. By January 1943, FRUPAC had amassed a collection of millions of punch cards. IBM machines processed millions of comparisons daily, and the monthly electricity bill surpassed that of a small city. Despite this extensive mechanization, human insight remained indispensable. Only seasoned linguists could recognize common Japanese phrases within certain code groups, and only analysts well-versed in Japanese military doctrine could discern strategic implications. While Midway garnished significant attention, the systematic destruction of Japan's merchant fleet through code-breaking efforts was JN-25's most crippling effect. By 1943, American submarines were sinking Japanese vessels faster than they could be replaced, effectively choking an island nation reliant on imports. This intelligence advantage proved to be decisive. Decrypted messages exposed convoy itineraries, schedules, and escort details. Submarine commanders received highly classified intelligence guiding them to precise coordinates where unguarded tankers would appear. The Japanese never suspected a breach of their codes, attributing losses to the growing submarine threat rather than intelligence lapses. In October 1944, Commander Richard O'Kane, commanding USS Tang, intercepted a decoded message revealing a convoy transporting aviation fuel from Borneo to the Philippines. Positioned perfectly by intelligence, Tang sank 7 ships in one night, depriving Japanese aircraft of critical fuel during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. The figures were alarming. Despite accounting for less than 2% of the Navy's personnel, American submarines managed to sink more than 30% of Japan's warships and over 60% of its merchant fleet. A significant portion of this success stemmed from code-breaking intelligence that exposed not only ship locations, but also their cargo types and defensive measures. By late 1944, Japan had suffered such severe tanker losses that fuel supplies for warships were scarce. Aviation training was severely restricted due to a lack of fuel, while island garrisons faced starvation as food transports failed to arrive. The Japanese economy crumbled as raw materials ceased to flow in. All these setbacks could be traced back to submarines guided by intelligence the Japanese never realized had been compromised. Throughout 1943 and 1944, evidence of code-breaking reached levels that were impossible to overlook. American submarines repeatedly intercepted convoys at their weakest points. American carriers appeared precisely where Japanese planning predicted they wouldn't. Meanwhile, American forces concentrated on countering Japanese attacks while leaving other areas inadequately defended. Vice Admiral Matome Ugaki, who succeeded Yamamoto as commander, noted in his diary that the enemy seemed to possess a sixth sense regarding Japanese operations. Every movement was tracked, every plan anticipated, yet even near recognition did not prompt a comprehensive security review. The Japanese made periodic changes to JN-25 approximately every 6 months, introducing new variants such as JN-25C on May 28, 1942, too late for the Battle of Midway, and JN-25D from August 1942 until March 1943. Each change temporarily reduced American readability, but never lasted longer than a few weeks. The core architecture remained unchanged, allowing American cryptanalysts to swiftly recover new code groups due to their growing proficiency. Despite accumulating direct evidence, the Japanese Navy's confidence in its codes endured. In November 1943, a decrypted message exposed the precise route of a convoy transporting reinforcements bound for Rabaul. American destroyers intercepted and sank each transport ship. Among the survivors was Commander Kato Tetsuo, a communications officer who reported that the Americans were lying in wait exactly where our course had changed. This indicated that they must have deciphered our codes. However, his report was disregarded as a result of battle stress. Kato was subsequently reassigned to Shajutoku and instructed not to discuss his perceived delusions. For those who cracked JN-25, victory came with significant moral dilemmas. They were aware that their triumph meant the death of thousands of Japanese sailors simply performing their duty. Each decoded message exposing ship positions directly translated into human lives lost. Marine translator Alva Laswell wrote in a private letter, "I decrypted the message that led to Admiral Yamamoto's demise. I had studied his writings and thoughts extensively. When I decoded his travel plans, it was like signing his death warrant. That knowledge haunts me." The burden was especially heavy when intercepts revealed hospital ships, prisoner transports, or refugee vessels. International law protected these ships, but positive identification often required decrypted messages. Cryptanalysts faced impossible decisions: reveal intelligence that could save civilians at the risk of compromising the code, or remain silent. Some intercepted messages detailed Japanese atrocities that could not be acted upon without exposing their source. Thomas Dyer later admitted, "We decoded communications about prisoner executions. We had to file them away, knowing that any revelation would mean losing access to all future intelligence." The psychological impact was diverse and profound. Some cryptanalysts were driven by an obsession with perfection, fearing that mistakes could lead to the loss of American lives. Others distanced themselves emotionally, regarding decoded messages as mere puzzles rather than crucial military intelligence. Many battled survivors' guilt, feeling conflicted about their relative safety, while others risked their lives under their direction. Despite official indifference and bureaucratic obstacles, history has recognized the significant contributions made by these analysts. Admiral Chester Nimitz declared unequivocally that without the intelligence provided by Rochefort and his team, the Pacific War would have lasted at least 2 years longer and cost hundreds of thousands more lives. General Douglas MacArthur acknowledged that the Navy's code breakers gave us the ability to see and hear what the enemy planned. They transformed the Pacific into a battlefield where we had advanced knowledge of every enemy move. Even Japanese military historians recognized the critical impact, with Professor Tanaka Hiroshi from the Japanese Defense University stating that breaking JN-25 was more devastating than any military defeat. Throughout the war, Japan faced an opponent who seemed to know their every plan. The true measure of success lies not in battles fought, but in those avoided thanks to intelligence. Understanding Japanese intentions allowed American forces to concentrate resources where needed and leave other areas undefended, enabling them to wage a two-ocean war with fewer resources than would have been necessary without the advantage of code breaking. Despite this, recognition was slow in coming. Rochefort's treatment was particularly harsh. Despite Nimitz's recommendation for the Distinguished Service Medal, Admiral King blocked it. In October 1942, Rochefort was relieved of command and sent to oversee a floating dry dock, never receiving another significant intelligence assignment. The medal was finally awarded in 1986, 10 years after his death, when President Reagan presented it to his son at the White House. an act that could not undo decades of official neglect. The revelation of American code-breaking successes shocked Japanese naval officers more than any other aspect of their defeat. Following post-war interrogations, numerous individuals were reluctant to accept the claims until presented with actual decrypted messages from years prior. The psychological toll was severe. They had been battling an adversary capable of reading their most confidential communications. Admiral Shidru Fukudome, who once served as Combined Fleet Chief of Staff, expressed this sentiment during his 1949 interrogation. "If we had known you were decrypting our messages, the course of the war would have been entirely different." He noted that they would have employed distinct tactics and taken various risks, effectively operating without visibility. Captain Wachitsanizo, who headed the Naval Intelligence Division, was even more forthright in his criticism. "Our failure to detect the code breach is unforgivable. The indications were apparent everywhere." These revelations prompted introspection within Japanese military circles that persists to this day. How could an intelligence service renowned for breaking Russian codes during the Russo-Japanese War falter so profoundly in safeguarding its own communications? The explanation lies in technological ignorance, institutional arrogance, and rigid thinking. The Japanese had failed to grasp the significance of IBM machines, which revolutionized code breaking. While they were still manually encrypting messages, Americans were decrypting millions of code groups using advanced electronic methods. This created a significant technology gap, with one side employing outdated techniques while the other utilized cutting-edge tools. THE Chinese letter JN-25 Chinese letter 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 Chinese letter. Under pressure, operators tend to rely on shortcuts and established patterns. The cooperative model created for JN-25, which united intercept stations, analytical hubs, and decentralized processing units, has set the standard for modern signals intelligence. This collaboration among the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand originated from partnerships formed during the decryption of Japanese codes. Ethical guidelines established at Station Hypo continue to shape current intelligence practices. The principle of safeguarding sources and methods, even if it means short-term sacrifice, remains crucial. Integrating signals intelligence with operational planning, a strategy pioneered by Rochefort and Nimitz, is now considered standard military protocol. Perhaps most significantly, JN-25 illustrated that strategic superiority can triumph over numerical or technological inferiority. In June 1942, the Japanese Navy boasted superior numbers, experience, and equipment compared to its American counterparts. However, American code breakers neutralized these advantages, allowing a less equipped force to secure a decisive victory through superior information. Despite the severe consequences of the Japanese naval intelligence failure, it offers warnings that remain pertinent today. The overconfidence that led to Japanese cryptographers' oversight is evident in every era's assessment of security systems. Today's unbreakable encryption could become tomorrow's simple challenge for quantum computers or artificial intelligence. The compartmentalization within the Japanese Navy, which hindered a thorough security evaluation, mirrors modern bureaucratic divisions that impede effective counterintelligence efforts. Human factors such as complacency, routine, and predictability continue to be primary vulnerabilities in contemporary cryptographic systems. Most disconcerting is the psychological aspect. The Japanese Navy could not conceive their codes were being compromised, because this scenario contradicted fundamental beliefs about Japan's superiority. Similar blind spots exist within every nation's intelligence structure, where assumptions deemed impossible can become realities through technological advancements or ingenuity. Modern military organizations study JN-25 as a cautionary tale, but they often overlook its most crucial lesson. Underestimating your adversary is likely to lead to defeat. The American cryptanalysts in the Pearl Harbor basement, dismissed by Japanese intelligence as incapable of deciphering their codes, methodically dismantled the Imperial Navy through mathematical analysis and mechanical computation. In San Antonio, Texas, in 1985, surviving members of Station Hypo convened for their sole reunion. Fewer than 30 individuals were present, with the majority of the original team having been claimed by age, distance, or death. They came together not as celebrated heroes, but as elderly men whose greatest accomplishment remained largely unrecognized. Thomas Dyer, then 83 years old, delivered the keynote speech. "We were mathematicians and linguists, not warriors. Our weapons consisted of pencils and punch cards rather than guns and bombs, yet we sank more Japanese ships than any task force and saved more American lives than any medical unit. We operated in the shadows then and continue to do so now." Joseph Finnegan, who had been sober for 2 decades but still bore psychological scars, remarked that each decoded message represented lives lost on both sides. Japanese sailors destined to die and American pilots likely to survive. Celebrating victories while knowing they meant death for enemies was part of following orders, a burden that never truly leaves you. The most touching moment at the reunion came when the group raised a toast to Joe Rochefort, who had passed away 9 years prior but remained their spiritual leader. His son accepted a flag flown over Pearl Harbor on June 4, 1982, the 40th anniversary of the Battle of Midway. The accompanying citations simply read, "To the man who made victory possible." The scale and impact of the American code-breaking achievement can be quantified through stark statistics, revealing both the operation's extent and its decisive influence. Station Hypo had between 30 to 50 personnel during the critical Midway period, expanding to over 100 by late 1942 at FRUPAC. By war's end, total Pacific cryptanalytic personnel numbered more than 5,000, up from 738 in December 1941. 5 major processing centers operated across the Pacific, with IBM machines processing millions of comparisons daily. JN-25 recovery progress in December 1941 was only partially readable for about 10 to 15% of messages. In April 1942, the team achieved a readability rate of 20%. By May 1942, after the Battle of Midway, this figure had risen to 40% with the recovery of numerous code groups. In December 1942, the progress was further advanced to 60%, and by the war's conclusion, nearly complete decryption of most variants was attained. The operational impact was significant. At Midway, 4 Japanese carriers were sunk compared to just 1 American carrier lost. Additionally, the submarine campaign resulted in the destruction of 1,314 Japanese vessels. In terms of merchant shipping, around 60% of Japan's total tonnage was eliminated. It is estimated that this effort prevented hundreds of thousands of potential American casualties. The Japanese intelligence service demonstrated several critical failures. They failed to identify any successful code breaks and ignored multiple incidents that should have prompted a security review. Even after the assassination of Admiral Yamamoto, no comprehensive investigation into these issues took place. Post-war analysis revealed that many high-ranking officers still doubted the effectiveness of their compromised codes. The struggle between code makers and code breakers in the Pacific was an early example of how technological warfare would shape future conflicts. While Japan relied on printed code books and manual Enigma-like machines, which were essentially outdated 19th-century technology, the United States employed advanced computational devices. The IBM machines at Station Hypo could perform thousands of comparisons per hour, searching for patterns that would have taken human analysts months to identify. Custom modifications allowed these business machines to execute cryptanalytic functions their designers never envisioned. Although primitive by today's standards, this approach was revolutionary during the war era. The Japanese continued to believe that manual systems were more secure because they could not be analyzed mechanically. This fundamental misconception crippled their cryptographic endeavors. They failed to develop mechanical encryption devices similar to Germany's Enigma machine and did not adopt IBM-style processing methods. Additionally, they were unaware that computational power could surpass mathematical complexity. By 1944, American cryptanalysts were experimenting with even more sophisticated technologies. Primitive computers utilizing telephone switching equipment were capable of attacking highly complex code groups. Photographic techniques allowed for quick duplication of intercepted codes. Radio teletype systems facilitated near-instantaneous intelligence sharing. Each advancement further widened the gap between American capabilities and Japanese assumptions. Joe Rochefort passed away on July 20, 1976, at Little Company of Mary Hospital in Torrance, California. In his final days, he gave one last interview from his hospital bed while barely able to sit up for 2 weeks prior, speaking softly. "People often ask if I feel resentful about my treatment. I do not. The work itself was its own reward. Every Japanese message we decrypted, every American life saved, is my medal of honor. We demonstrated that in modern warfare, information holds more power than firepower. A small team working from a basement outperformed the Japanese Navy to a greater extent than any naval engagement ever could. We sunk ships through mathematics, disrupted plans with analysis, and defeated strategies with intelligence. The true lesson here is not about code breaking, it's about arrogance. The Japanese were so confident in their superiority that they failed to consider being outsmarted. They mistook complexity for security and tradition for strength. They never comprehended that the moment you believe yourself invincible is when you are most vulnerable. For 3 years, I pored over intercepted messages from Japanese admirals, gaining an intimate understanding of our adversaries that even they lacked about themselves. Witnessing their empire crumble through what they believed to be confidential communications was both enlightening and disheartening. My deepest regret is the lack of recognition for my team members who sacrificed everything in secrecy. These unsung heroes fought with pens and machines rather than weapons. History should acknowledge them as well. The Japanese were never aware that JN-25 had been cracked, and to this day, some still doubt it. Our knowledge was a source of both pride and weight. From a basement in Pearl Harbor, we rewrote history by breaking one of the most critical codes of World War II. This accomplishment represents one of the greatest intelligence victories in history. A small group of American cryptanalysts, armed with rudimentary computers and unparalleled dedication, systematically dismantled Japanese naval communication security over 3 years of conflict. The Japanese Navy remained oblivious to the fact that their trusted code had been thoroughly decrypted. Throughout numerous baffling defeats, they clung steadfastly to a system that continually exposed them. This blindness, fueled by arrogance and institutional flaws, ultimately led Japan to its downfall in World War II. Despite their extraordinary achievements, the Americans who cracked JN-25 went largely unrecognized during their lifetimes. Rochefort's career was ruined for his success, while his team was disbanded and silenced. Classified for decades, their invisible triumph may have been the most pivotal of the Pacific theater. In an era dominated by digital encryption and quantum computing, the lessons from breaking JN-25 continue to hold relevance today. No code is invincible. No system can be considered perfectly secure. Human error, complacency, predictability, and overconfidence remain the weakest links in any security framework. Institutional blindness hindered Japan from acknowledging a compromised code, an issue that plagues any organization overly confident in its security measures. The basement where Station Hypo once operated is now merely a storage space. Its IBM machines long gone and its heroes largely forgotten. Yet their legacy lives on, influencing every intelligence operation, each code deciphered, and every intercepted message. They demonstrated that wars can be won through patience, ingenuity, and meticulous decryption efforts. Japan remained oblivious to the fact that the U.S. Navy had cracked their JN-25 cipher. This ignorance led to the loss of their empire, fleet, and ultimately their war effort. No intelligence failure was more comprehensive, destructive, or avoidable than Japan's unwavering belief in an unbroken code, decrypted by Americans working out of a Pearl Harbor basement. These analysts intercepted every message and knew all plans, waiting patiently for the enemy to fall into the trap set by ultra-intelligence. This story underscores that the most perilous adversary is not one who possesses your secrets, but rather the one you never suspect is listening. The Imperial Japanese Navy learned this lesson too late, discovering upon surrender that throughout the war, American cryptanalysts had been decoding their communications and guiding their downfall, ensuring Japan's ambitions in the Pacific would be permanently extinguished.